The moment the word, Baron, flashed across the giant wedding screen behind my sister, the entire ballroom exploded in laughter. 200 people, crystal chandeliers, champagne glasses clinking, a live jazz band pausing mid-note, and my private medical diagnosis, something only 3 people in the world were supposed to know, was now glowing in bold white letters 10 feet tall behind the bride. My father chuckled into the microphone like he'd just delivered the punchline of the century. "Relax, sweetheart," he said, smiling at me from the head table. "It's just family humor." My mother lifted her champagne flute and smirked like she was watching reality TV. And my sister, perfect, glowing bride in a 20,000 Verawang dress, leaned into her mic and said sweetly, "Careful laughing too hard, guys. She might actually cry this time." The guests laughed again. Some of them looked at me. Most didn't. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone, typed one word, and pressed send. BGN. 3 seconds later, the projector flickered. The screen went black. The laughter died instantly. Somewhere behind the tech booth, a USB drive slid into a different port. And the story my family had spent 16 years burying finally started playing. But to understand why I did it, you have to go back 4 weeks. It was 7:57 p.m. on a Thursday night when the phone call came. I was alone in my apartment in Richmond, Virginia, sitting at my drafting table surrounded by blueprints for a courthouse restoration project. My coffee had gone cold 2 hours earlier. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Area code 5540. My hometown. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Hello." A calm woman's voice replied. "Is this Claire Bennett?" My stomach tightened. No one back in Redwood Hollow had used that name for me in 16 years. "Yes," I said carefully. "My name is Dolores Sanchez. I'm a nurse at Blue Ridge Care Center." My heart skipped. "My grandmother," I said, "Margaret Bennett." "Yes. She asked me to call you." I closed my eyes. My grandmother was 84 years old, and the only person in my family who had never treated me like a mistake. "How is she?" I asked quietly. "She's scheduled for hip replacement surgery in 3 weeks," Dolores said. "Her doctors believe she'll be okay, but at her age, there are risks." My grip tightened around the phone. "She's been asking to see you." A lump formed in my throat. I hadn't seen my grandmother in 2 years. Not because I didn't want to. Because my father made sure I couldn't. Then the nurse said something that made my blood run cold. "There's something else," Dolores added. "Your father told her you're welcome to visit. But only if you attend your sister's wedding first." Of course he did. Every interaction with my father came with terms and conditions. "And Claire," she continued softly. "Yes. Your grandmother wanted me to warn you." A pause. "She said your family is planning something at the reception. Something about you." My eyes drifted to the framed certificate hanging on my wall. Virginia Architectural Society. Rising Architect of the Year, 16 years of silence from my hometown. And the first message I received from them wasn't an apology. It was a warning. To understand why my grandmother was worried, you need to go back 16 years. Back to when I was 18. Back to the night my father decided I was no longer part of the family. We were sitting around the dining room table in my parents' mansion in Redwood Hollow. My father, Charles Bennett, slid a document across the table toward me. A property transfer form. 2 acres of land on the edge of town, rolling hills, a creek, and a massive oak tree in the center. My grandmother had given it to me on my 16th birthday, legally, signed, not a symbolic gift. "Mine, sign it over," my father said calmly. "I need that parcel for the Oak Ridge Development Project." I looked at the paper. Then at him. No. My mother didn't even look up from her magazine. The only sound in the room was pages flipping. 3 days later, my college tuition fund disappeared. The account my parents had been bragging about since I was born. Gone. A week after that, my father stood by the front door with his arms crossed. "If you walk out that door," he said, "don't ever come back." My little sister Emily watched from the staircase. She was 12. She didn't say a word. Neither did my mother. I left with a duffel bag, $42, and nowhere to go. For 2 weeks I slept in my car behind a gas station outside Charlottesville. I worked night shifts at a diner that smelled like grease and burnt coffee. I got my GED. Then community college. Then a scholarship to Virginia Commonwealth University. I studied architecture because I liked the idea of building things that couldn't be taken away by someone else's signature. I graduated at 23. No one came. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not even a text. I celebrated alone with takeout Chinese food on the floor of my studio apartment. Then life moved on. I got married at 24. Divorced at 27. At 28 a doctor told me I'd never have children. I processed that news alone in a sterile clinic waiting room under flickering fluorescent lights. And somehow, my sister found out, because my ex-husband still talked to my parents. Leverage was always valuable in the Bennett family. Now I was 34, senior architect at Harrison & Cole Design Group. Owner of my own home. Builder of buildings across 3 states. But back in Redwood Hollow, I was still the girl who ran away and ruined her life. The morning after the nurse's call, I told my coworker Marcus Grant everything. Marcus was 36, former Army communications tech, and the closest thing to family I had left. When I finished explaining the wedding situation, he leaned back in his chair. "They're planning to humiliate you," he said. "Probably. And you're still going. My grandmother might die during surgery," I said quietly. He nodded slowly. "Then we go prepared." That night I booked a hotel room in Redwood Hollow, pulled a navy dress out of my closet, and started making a plan, because my family had always assumed one thing about me: that I would sit quietly while they rewrote my story. They were about to find out how wrong they were. 3 weeks later, I walked into my sister's wedding reception. Sat alone at table 16 in the back corner. Watched the slideshow start playing, and when the word, "Barren," appeared on that giant screen behind the bride, I finally sent the message. Begin. And what happened next didn't just ruin a wedding, it destroyed 16 years of lies. The moment the screen behind my sister went black, my father's smile froze. At first, nobody panicked. People assumed it was a glitch. The wedding planner, some stressed woman in a headset, hurried toward the tech booth near the bar while the jazz band awkwardly filled the silence with soft piano chords. My sister Emily leaned toward the microphone and laughed. "Looks like the slideshow crashed," she joked. Polite laughter rippled through the ballroom, but then the projector flickered again, and a new image appeared. Not the wedding slideshow, not baby pictures, not engagement photos, just a single document filling the massive screen. A legal contract. Stamped. Signed. Dated 16 years ago. I heard someone whisper behind me, "Is that a property deed?" Yes. Yes, it was. The room grew quiet. At the head table, my father slowly stood. "Turn that off." He snapped toward the tech booth, but the screen didn't go dark. Instead, the camera zoomed in digitally on the signature line. Margaret Bennett. Then another line highlighted itself. Property owner, Claire Bennett. A soft murmur rolled through the crowd. My father's jaw tightened. And then a calm female voice filled the ballroom speakers. My voice, recorded earlier that week. "Hi everyone. If you're watching this, it means the Bennett family decided to tell a story tonight." A few guests turned in their chairs looking for me. I stayed seated, sipping my water, watching. The recording continued. Since they're sharing personal information about my life, I thought it was only fair we share a little family history too. The next slide appeared. A photograph. My father standing beside a billboard design for Oak Ridge Development. The exact piece of land behind him was my land. The same 2 acres my grandmother legally gave me. Gasps rippled across the room. Someone near the front muttered, "Wait, isn't that the Bennett housing project outside town?" The recording continued calmly. In 2010, my father attempted to force me to sign over property legally given to me by my grandmother. When I refused, the slide changed again. A bank statement. Balance the 87,422, withdrawal 87,422, date 3 days after that dinner. My father's voice suddenly exploded across the ballroom. "Tha Surayus." He stormed toward the tech booth, but Marcus was already standing there, 6'2", former Army, arms crossed. The wedding planner nervously stepped aside. Marcus didn't touch the controls, he didn't need to. The laptop running the presentation wasn't even in the booth. It was in the DJ station across the room, exactly where we planned. The recording continued. 3 days after refusing to give up my property, my father emptied my college fund. A stunned voice spoke somewhere near the front. Charles, tell me that's fake. It was Mayor Robert Klein, family friend, political ally. My father froze mid-step. Then the next slide appeared. A scanned letter, signed by my father. The title across the top, someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." My sister Emily grabbed the microphone again. "This is some kind of misunderstanding," she said quickly. But her voice shook. The recording didn't stop. 7 days later, my voice continued from the speakers. My father told me if I left the house, I could never come back. The screen changed again. A photo, 18-year-old me, standing outside our front door, holding a duffel bag. Someone had taken it from the upstairs window. I knew exactly who. Emily. 16 years ago. I watched her face now as the image filled the ballroom. Her makeup suddenly looked too heavy. Too perfect. Guests were whispering openly now. What kind of parents kick their kid out? Was she really 18? Overland. Then the next slide appeared. A satellite image. The Oak Ridge housing development. 42 luxury homes, selling for nearly $800,000 each. Right in the center of the image, 2 acres of untouched land, my land, the only green patch inside the entire development. My voice echoed calmly through the speakers. Because I refused to sign that land away. Oak Ridge Development was forced to redesign their entire neighborhood around a property they didn't own. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room. Then someone said, "Wait, that's the empty field by the creek." "Yes," the recording answered softly. "That's mine." My father lunged toward the DJ booth. "Turn-it-off." But Marcus stepped forward. "Sir," he said calmly, "touch that equipment and you'll be damaging rented property." The DJ nodded nervously. The recording continued. And now, 16 years later, my family decided to show my private medical information at my sister's wedding. The slide changed. Now the screen showed a screenshot of the text message Emily sent 2 weeks earlier. "EMLI, just show up, smile, and maybe people will forget you're the family embarrassment." Another gasp rolled through the ballroom. Emily's face went pale. Then came the final slide, a screenshot of a group chat. "Participants, Mom, Dad, Emily." The message at the top read, "Dad, put the infertility slide near the end. It'll get the biggest laugh." The room went silent. Utterly silent. Even the band had stopped playing. My father looked like someone had punched him in the throat. My mother stared at the screen with wide eyes. Emily's hands trembled around the microphone. And then my recorded voice delivered the final line. So tonight, when my family decided to humiliate me in front of 200 guests. A pause. I simply decided to tell the rest of the story. The screen faded to black. The ballroom sat in stunned silence. For exactly 3 seconds. Then the whispering started. Fast. Loud. Relentless. Someone at table 5 stood up. "I think we're leaving." Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, this is messed up." Mayor Klein slowly removed his napkin and set it beside his plate. "Charles," he said quietly, "we'll talk Monday." And just like that, the most powerful man in Redwood Hollow realized his reputation was collapsing. Right in the middle of his daughter's wedding. But the worst part for my family. The presentation wasn't over yet. Because the next video wasn't recorded by me. It was recorded by someone they thought would never betray them. And when that video started playing, my sister finally screamed. Emily's scream cut through the ballroom the second the screen lit up again. "No! Turn it off!" But it was already too late. The video started playing. At first the image was shaky, like someone adjusting their phone camera. Then the frame steadied. And the entire room gasped, because the woman sitting in the hospital room chair was unmistakable. My grandmother. Margaret Bennett. Her silver hair was brushed neatly back, her hospital bracelet visible on her wrist. The pale green walls behind her confirmed exactly where she was. Blue Ridge Care Center. She looked straight into the camera, and then she spoke. "Hello, Redwood Hollow?" The room froze. Even my father stopped moving. My grandmother continued calmly. If you're watching this, then my son Charles has finally gone too far. A quiet wave of murmurs spread through the guests. My father shook his head slowly. No, no. But my grandmother kept talking. 16 years ago, I gave my granddaughter Claire 2 acres of land, because I believed she deserved something that belonged to her alone. The camera zoomed slightly closer, and when she refused to give it up, my son punished her. People in the audience shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The video continued. He emptied her college fund. A pause. He threw her out of the house. Another pause. And then he spent the next 16 years telling the town she ran away. Someone near the back whispered loudly, "Holy hell!" My grandmother leaned closer to the camera. But that's not the worst part. The ballroom grew deadly quiet. Even Emily stopped crying. Then the video cut to another clip. Different day. Same hospital room. This time my grandmother held a folder. Inside it were printed emails. She lifted one page toward the camera. Charles Bennett, she read slowly, CEO of Bennett Development Group, submitted these plans to the Redwood Hollow Zoning Board in 2010. The camera zoomed in. The architectural blueprint appeared on screen. Oak Ridge Development. Right across the middle of the design, 2 acres were labeled. A secured by fail transfer. My grandmother sighed. That land was never transferred. A man near the bar muttered, "Wait, that's fraud." The video continued. My son built 42 luxury homes around land he didn't legally own, hoping Claire would eventually give in. Gasps filled the ballroom. Someone near the front said, "He sold those houses for nearly $1 million each." My grandmother nodded slowly in the video. Yes, and when buyers asked why the field in the middle remained empty, he told them it was reserved for a community park. She lowered the papers, but it was never a park. The next slide appeared. A letter, official, stamped, from the Virginia State Property Commission. My voice returned on the audio recording. 2 weeks ago, I submitted a formal complaint regarding the Oak Ridge Development Project. The ballroom erupted with whispers. My father looked like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. My voice continued. The investigation officially opened yesterday morning. A woman at table 3 whispered, "Oh my God, that means..." Yes. It meant exactly what they thought. The next slide appeared. Illegal RVEW. Possilifar Utilen Land FLAM. Mayor Klein stood up slowly from his chair. Charles. But my father didn't answer. He just stared at the screen like he was watching his entire life burn down. The video switched back to my grandmother. She looked tired now, but determined. "I'm proud of my granddaughter," she said softly. Because she didn't fight back with cruelty. She paused. She fought back with truth. Across the room, Emily gripped the microphone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This is insane," she shouted. "She's manipulating a sick old woman." The reaction was instant. Several guests stood up. One older man near the dance floor said sharply, "That sick old woman helped build half this town, Emily." My grandmother's video continued. "I won't be attending this wedding tonight," she said gently. "But if Claire is there, I want her to know something." The camera moved slightly closer. "Sweetheart, you were never the family disgrace." A lump formed in my throat. 16 years. 16 years of silence, and those were the first words my grandmother had publicly spoken about me. The video ended. The screen went black, and the ballroom exploded. Voices everywhere. "Did you know about this? Charles is finished. They're going to audit that entire project. Those homeowners are going to sue." One by one, guests began standing. Chairs scraped loudly across the polished floor. Some people grabbed their coats. Others walked straight toward the exit. The wedding planner looked like she was about to faint. My father finally found his voice. "This is a smear campaign," he shouted. But nobody was listening anymore. The damage was already done. Then Emily turned toward the room, mascara streaking down her face. "You're all just going to believe her," she screamed. That's when a calm voice spoke behind her. "Actually, I believe the paperwork." Every head turned. Standing near the entrance was a tall man in a dark suit. Calm, composed, holding a leather briefcase. I recognized him instantly. Daniel Reeves, senior investigator from the Virginia Property Commission. He had emailed me 3 days earlier. But I hadn't expected him to show up tonight. He walked slowly into the ballroom and said something that made my sister drop the microphone. "Mr. Bennett," he said evenly, "we need to discuss 42 fraudulent property disclosures." The microphone hit the floor with a loud clange. Emily stared at the investigator like the world had tilted sideways. My father didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Because for the first time in his life, the Bennett family wasn't controlling the story anymore. And the night was only getting worse. Because someone else had just arrived at the wedding. Someone my parents never expected to see again. And when that person stepped into the ballroom, my mother nearly collapsed. My mother's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor the moment she saw him. The sound sliced through the chaos like a gunshot. Everyone turned toward the ballroom entrance. And that's when the whispers started again. "Is that? No way. Why would he be here?" Standing in the doorway was a tall man in his early 40s wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my father's car payment. His hair was darker than I remembered, but the confident way he stood, hands casually in his pockets, hadn't changed at all. "Ethan Walker. My ex-husband." Emily's jaw dropped. "Claire, you brought him here," she whispered into the dead microphone. I didn't answer. Because technically, I hadn't. Ethan stepped further into the room, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor as he walked past tables of stunned guests. When he reached the center of the ballroom, he looked straight at my father. "Evening, Charles." My father's face went gray. "You're not welcome here." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "That's funny," he said calmly. "Because technically, I was invited." Murmurs swept across the room. My father's eyes flicked toward me. I just sat there, watching. Ethan turned toward the guests like he was addressing a board meeting. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ethan Walker. I used to be married to Claire Bennett." Emily scoffed loudly. "Oh, great. The loser ex-husband is here too." But Ethan didn't react. Instead, he pulled a folded document from his suit jacket. "My company represents 3 homeowners inside the Oak Ridge development." The room went silent again. My father's shoulders stiffened. Ethan unfolded the paper slowly. "And they've asked me to deliver something tonight." He handed the document directly to Daniel Reeves, the investigator from the Virginia Property Commission. Reeves glanced at it. Then his eyebrows shot up. "This confirms it," he said quietly. My father's voice cracked. "Confirms what?" Reeves looked up. "The land in the center of Oak Ridge. The land you claimed was under pending family transfer." He held up the document. "Was actually placed into a protected environmental easement 2 weeks ago." The room erupted. "What does that mean? Wait. Can he still develop it? Does that void the neighborhood permit?" Reeves answered calmly. "It means the property cannot legally be developed, ever." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. My father's face twisted in confusion. "That's impossible," he said. "Claire wouldn't." Ethan interrupted him. "She didn't." He pointed toward the document. "I did." Every head in the room snapped toward him. Emily laughed nervously. "Okay, now I know this is fake." But Ethan wasn't smiling. He turned toward me across the ballroom. Our eyes met for the first time in 3 years. Then he looked back at my father. 3 months ago, Claire contacted me to help her understand the legal protections surrounding inherited land." A pause. "She never asked me to do anything else." Now the whispers were turning into full conversations. "What did he do? Why would he help her?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because when I learned what happened to her at 18, his voice hardened. I realized I had married someone whose family treated her like property." The words hung heavy in the room. My mother suddenly found her voice. "You cheated on her," she snapped. Ethan didn't even blink. "No." He looked directly at her. "She divorced me." That got everyone's attention, because my parents had spent years telling everyone in town the opposite story. Emily's voice trembled. "Claire told everyone you left her." "No," Ethan said calmly. "I told people that." He turned slowly toward the crowd. Because I was embarrassed. The room held its breath. Embarrassed. Ethan's jaw tightened. I wasn't man enough to support my wife when she learned she couldn't have children. The silence became suffocating. My mother's eyes widened. My father looked like someone had punched him in the chest. Ethan continued quietly. Claire never betrayed me. He looked directly at me again. I betrayed her. 16 years of lies had already collapsed tonight. But that confession cracked open something deeper. Something human. Something painful. Even Emily looked shaken. Then Ethan delivered the final blow. After the divorce, Charles Bennett contacted me. The entire ballroom froze again. He offered me money, Ethan said calmly. My father shouted, "That's a lie!" But Ethan ignored him. $200,000? He continued, in exchange for giving him copies of Claire's medical records. The air vanished from the room. My mother staggered backward into her chair. Emily whispered, "Dad, tell me he's lying." My father said nothing. Because he couldn't. Because every person in that ballroom had just realized something horrifying. The infertility diagnosis that flashed on the wedding screen tonight had been stolen, bought, sold, used. My father tried to speak, but no words came out, and that's when I finally stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. 200 heads turned toward me. For 16 years, I had been the quiet ghost of Redwood Hollow. The runaway daughter, the family disgrace. Tonight, I was finally done being silent. I walked slowly toward the center of the ballroom. Past the stunned guests. Past Ethan. Past the investigator. Until I was standing directly in front of my parents. My mother's voice trembled. "Claire, please." But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at my father, and for the first time in 16 years, he looked afraid. Then I said something that made the entire room go completely still. "Dada." I smiled softly. "You should probably sit down." A pause. "Because the police are on their way," Emily gasped. My father's face drained of color, and outside the ballroom, sirens began to echo down the street. The first police siren cut through the night like a blade. At first, some guests thought it was just a coincidence, maybe a patrol car passing the venue on its way somewhere else. But then a second siren joined it, and a third. The flashing red and blue lights began reflecting through the ballroom's tall glass windows. Every conversation in the room died instantly. Emily's face drained of color. My father turned slowly toward the entrance doors. "No?" he whispered. But the doors opened anyway. 2 Redwood Hollow police officers stepped inside, followed by a third man wearing a dark navy blazer with a gold badge clipped to his belt. The room buzzed with anxious whispers. Is this really happening? Are they arresting someone? The man with the badge walked calmly toward the center of the ballroom. When he spoke, his voice was controlled and official. "Charles Bennett." My father didn't answer. He stood frozen near the head table. The officer repeated himself. "Mr. Charles Bennett." My father finally stepped forward. "Yes?" he said tightly. "I'm Charles Bennett." The man with the badge pulled a folded document from his folder. "I'm Detective Aaron Whittaker, Redwood Hollow Financial Crimes Unit." The entire room seemed to lean forward. Detective Whittaker opened the paper slowly. "Mr. Bennett, we've received multiple complaints regarding potential financial fraud connected to Bennett Development Group." Emily let out a panicked laugh. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly. "You can't investigate someone based on a slideshow." But Whittaker didn't even look at her. He looked directly at my father. "We also received additional documentation tonight." His eyes briefly shifted toward Daniel Reeves, the property investigator. Reeves nodded. The detective continued reading. "Specifically regarding fraudulent zoning disclosures, misrepresentation of land ownership, and unlawful property filings connected to the Oak Ridge development." A wave of murmurs spread across the guests. Several people were now recording the scene on their phones. My father's voice turned icy. "You're embarrassing yourself, Detective." Whittaker calmly folded the document again. "Actually, sir, I believe that's already been handled." A few people chuckled nervously. Emily stepped forward. "My dad didn't do anything illegal." Whittaker finally turned toward her. "Miss Bennett. We're not here to debate." He gestured toward the door. "We're here to request your father accompany us for questioning." Emily looked like she might faint. My mother grabbed the edge of the table for support. But the detective wasn't finished. "There's also another matter." My father's eyes narrowed. "What matter?" Whitaker glanced down at another document. $200,000 transferred from Bennett Development Group to an offshore account belonging to Ethan Walker Consulting, LLC. The entire ballroom turned toward Ethan. Emily pointed at him. "See." He took the money, but Ethan didn't react. Instead, he calmly pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to the detective. Whitaker studied it for a moment, then looked up. "Correction," he said. "The money was transferred." He turned the phone so the room could see the screen. "A donation receipt. Virginia Legal Defense Fund. Domestic Abuse Survivors Program amount to $200,000. Anonymous gasps rippled through the ballroom. Ethan slid his phone back into his pocket. "I figured if Charles was offering hush money," he said quietly, "it might as well help someone." For the first time all night, people actually clapped. Softly at first, then louder. Emily stared around the room in disbelief. "You're all insane," she shouted. My father looked like he was about to explode. "This is extortion?" he barked. Detective Whitaker sighed. "No, Mr. Bennett." He gestured toward the investigator again. "This is documentation." Then he said the words that finally cracked the entire evening wide open. "And unfortunately for you, it doesn't stop with Oak Ridge." The room went silent again. Whitaker opened another folder. "There are currently 5 additional developments under review." 5. Even I hadn't known that. My father's face went pale. "Those are legitimate projects." Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Then you shouldn't have any problem answering questions." My mother suddenly grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate. "Claire," she whispered. It was the first time she'd spoken directly to me all night. Her voice trembled. "You have to stop this." I looked at her slowly. 16 years. 16 years since she'd last defended me. "You didn't stop it," I said quietly. "When they showed my medical records." Her face crumpled. "That was Emily's idea." Emily spun around. "Mom." The detective cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, I'm going to ask you again." He gestured toward the exit. "Please come with us." My father stood there for several seconds. The entire town watching, his reputation, his business, his power, everything slipping away. Finally, he straightened his jacket. "I'll cooperate," he said coldly. The officers escorted him toward the door. But just before he stepped outside, he turned back toward me. His voice was low. "Dangerous. You think you've won tonight?" I met his eyes calmly. "No," I said. "I think the truth finally showed up." He stared at me for a long moment. Then the doors closed behind him, and the most powerful man in Redwood Hollow walked out of his daughter's wedding under police escort. The ballroom sat in stunned silence. Emily suddenly screamed and hurled her bouquet across the room.
"This is you or for you?"
She shouted at me. Her mascara was completely ruined now. Her perfect wedding dress looked like a costume from a collapsing play. But I didn't answer, because something else had just happened. Across the ballroom, Marcus was staring at his phone, his eyebrows slowly rising. Then he looked up at me. "Claire." His voice was quiet. "But you need to see this." He turned the screen toward me, and the headline made my stomach drop. My grandmother. Something had gone wrong. The moment I saw the headline about my grandmother, the wedding reception disappeared from my mind. All the noise, all the chaos, all the revenge, none of it mattered anymore. "Marcus," I said quietly, already grabbing my purse, "I need your keys." He didn't hesitate. Within seconds we were moving through the ballroom, past stunned guests and half-empty tables, toward the exit. Behind us, Emily was still screaming at someone. Maybe the wedding planner, maybe the band, maybe the universe. I didn't look back. Outside, the cool Virginia night hit my face like a wake-up call. Marcus tossed me the keys to his truck. "Blue Ridge Care Center?" he asked. I nodded. 10 minutes if we hit the lights," he said. The engine roared to life, and we drove. The streets of Redwood Hollow blurred past the windows. Same quiet town. Same brick storefronts. Same gas station where I used to buy late-night coffee during high school. But tonight it felt like a different place entirely, because tonight, the Bennett name wasn't untouchable anymore. Marcus glanced over as we sped through an intersection. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. My grandmother had been the one constant in my life. When my parents cut me off, she secretly mailed me grocery gift cards during my first year of college. When I graduated, she sent me a handwritten note that said, "Build things no one can tear down." She never once asked me to forgive my parents. She never once told me to come back home, she just loved me quietly. And now something had gone wrong. Marcus parked outside the hospital entrance. "You want me to come in?" he asked. I shook my head. "I've got this." But the second I stepped through the hospital doors, I realized I didn't, because sitting in the waiting area was the one person I least expected to see. My mother. Linda Bennett. Her perfect makeup was gone. Her hair was messy, and she looked smaller somehow. When she saw me, she stood up slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Your grandmother asked for you." My chest tightened. "Is she okay?" My mother swallowed. "The surgery had complications." A cold wave rolled through me. "But she's stable now," she added quickly. Relief hit so hard I had to grab the back of a chair. Then something strange happened. My mother started crying, not dramatic crying. Not the polite social tears she used at charity events. Real crying. "I didn't know they were going to do that tonight," she whispered. I looked at her. "You didn't know they were going to show my medical records?" She shook her head desperately. "Emily told me it was just a joke slideshow." A bitter laugh escaped my throat. "You didn't question it?" Her silence answered the question. 16 years. 16 years of looking the other way. Then a nurse approached us. "Claire Bennett." I stepped forward. "Yes, she's awake," the nurse said gently. "She's been asking for you." My mother reached for my arm. "Can I?" "No." The word came out sharper than I expected. Her hand dropped, and for the first time in my life, she didn't argue. The hospital room was dim and quiet. Machines hummed softly beside the bed. My grandmother looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. But when she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Well," she said softly, "I guess the wedding went exactly how I predicted." Despite everything, I laughed. "You watched?" She smiled faintly. "Dolores streamed it on her phone." "Of course she did." My grandmother squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." A lump formed in my throat. "I didn't do it to hurt them," I said quietly. "I know," she said. "You did it to stop them." She reached toward the bedside drawer. "Help me with that folder." Inside was a thick stack of documents. Legal paperwork, property records, and something else. A sealed envelope with my name written across the front. "What is this?" I asked. My grandmother leaned back against the pillows. "Insurance." I opened the envelope, and immediately felt the blood drain from my face. Because inside was a letter, signed, not by my father, not by a lawyer, but by Emily. Dated 6 years ago. I looked up slowly. "What is this?" My grandmother's eyes were tired now. "Your sister came to see me after your divorce." A pause. She was scared.
Off what?
My grandmother's voice dropped to a whisper. "Off your father." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "She told me something that day," my grandmother continued, "something she made me promise never to repeat unless things got dangerous." My stomach tightened. "What did she say?" My grandmother met my eyes, and spoke the words that shattered the last piece of the Bennett family story. "Emily didn't plan the slideshow tonight." My heart pounded. "Then who did?" My grandmother closed her eyes briefly, then said the name. "Your father." The air left my lungs. "He forced her to do it." A cold realization spread through my chest. Emily hadn't been the mastermind. She had been the weapon. And suddenly the night's chaos made terrifying sense. Because my father hadn't just been humiliating me. He'd been destroying his own daughter's wedding. On purpose. And as that realization sank in, my grandmother squeezed my hand again. "Claire." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "There's one more thing you need to know." I leaned closer. "What is it?" She looked at me with quiet certainty. "Your father isn't done fighting." A pause. And the next move he makes. Her fingers tightened around mine. Won't be about the land. The hospital hallway exploded with shouting before I even opened the door. At first I thought it was another patient emergency. But then I heard the voice. Emily's voice. Where is she? My stomach dropped. I stepped into the hallway just as two nurses tried to calm her down. Her wedding dress was wrinkled now. The elegant train was gone, probably torn off somewhere during the chaos at the reception. Her makeup had smeared across her cheeks, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders, like she had been pulling at it for hours. She looked nothing like the glowing bride from earlier that night. She looked broken. The moment she saw me, she froze. For a few seconds we just stared at each other across the hallway. 16 years of distance, 16 years of resentment, 16 years of silence. Finally she spoke. Is she alive? Her voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. She's stable. Emily let out a shaky breath and leaned against the wall. The anger drained from her face so quickly it almost scared me. For the first time that night, she looked like the little sister I used to know. Then her eyes hardened again. You ruined my wedding. The words came out flat, not screaming, not crying, just empty. I crossed my arms. You showed my infertility diagnosis to 200 people. She shook her head immediately. No, I didn't. I laughed bitterly. Oh really? Dad did. The hallway fell silent. For a moment I wondered if my grandmother had told her already. Emily looked exhausted. 2 weeks ago he called me into his office, she said quietly. He had the slideshow ready. Her voice trembled. I told him it was cruel. A nurse walked past us slowly, clearly pretending not to listen. Emily continued. He said if I didn't include it, he'd cancel the wedding. My jaw tightened. He paid for everything, she whispered. The venue, the catering, the dress. Her eyes filled with tears. He said if I wanted my perfect wedding, I had to follow his plan. Suddenly the image of Emily from the reception looked different in my memory. Not confident, not triumphant. Desperate, but why? I asked quietly. Emily let out a hollow laugh. You really don't know? I shook my head. She stared at the hospital floor for a long moment. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. Because he hates you. The words hung in the air like poison. I swallowed slowly. I figured that out years ago. Emily shook her head again. No, you don't understand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He doesn't just hate you. She looked up at me. He's terrified of you. That stopped me cold. Why would he be afraid of me? Emily hesitated. Then she said something that changed everything. Because of the land. I frowned. The land. That field in Oak Ridge. She said. You think it's just 2 acres. A pause. It's not. My heart started beating faster. What are you talking about? Emily rubbed her temples like the memory itself hurt. I overheard him talking to a developer last year. Her voice shook. They discovered something underneath that property. The hallway suddenly felt too small. What kind of something? Emily met my eyes. Natural gas. The word slammed into me. Natural gas. Under my land. Suddenly everything clicked. The development. The pressure. The threats. The 16 years of manipulation. My father hadn't wanted the land for houses. He wanted the mineral rights. Emily nodded slowly when she saw my expression. Dad said if he controlled the land, he could sell drilling rights for millions. Millions. Not thousands. Not hundreds of thousands. Millions. That's why he tried to force you to sign it over. She whispered. That's why he never stopped trying. My chest felt tight. And tonight. Emily looked sick. Tonight was supposed to destroy you. The hallway felt colder somehow. He said if the whole town believed you were unstable, selfish, cruel. Her voice cracked. Then when he sued you for the property later, no one would question it. The realization made my stomach churn. 16 years. 16 years of planning. Then Emily said the one thing that made my blood run cold. He already filed the lawsuit. My head snapped up. What? This morning, she whispered. He filed it this morning. My mind raced. That meant tonight's humiliation wasn't revenge. It was strategy. Character assassination before a legal battle. Before I could respond, A calm voice spoke from behind us. She's telling the truth. We both turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was Daniel Reeves, the property investigator. He held a folder under his arm. I just received confirmation, he said. He handed me a document. My heart pounded as I read the first line. Filed 8 hours earlier, my father had sued me, claiming I obtained the land through undue influence over an elderly relative. My grandmother. The room seemed to spin. Emily looked horrified. He told me it was just paperwork, she whispered. Reeves sighed quietly. Your father is trying to claim Margaret Bennett was mentally unfit when she signed the deed 16 years ago. A chill spread through my chest. If he proved that claim, the land would revert to him. Emily looked at me helplessly. I didn't know, she whispered, and for the first time in 16 years, I believed her. But Reeves wasn't finished. There's something else. My stomach dropped again. What now? He hesitated, then said the words that changed the night completely. Your father just made bail. Emily's eyes widened. He's out. Reeves nodded slowly. And according to the courthouse records. A pause. He's already heading here. The hallway went silent. My pulse thundered in my ears. Because if my father was coming to the hospital, it wasn't for me. It was for the one person who could destroy his entire lawsuit. My grandmother. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. Every muscle in my body tightened. Because I already knew who was inside. My father stepped into the hospital hallway like he still owned the world. Even after the police escort. Even after the investigation. Even after the entire town watched his reputation implode at his daughter's wedding, Charles Bennett still walked like a man who believed he could bend reality to his will. 2 lawyers followed closely behind him, both carrying leather folders. Of course he brought lawyers. Emily sucked in a sharp breath beside me. Dad, what are you doing here? He didn't even look at her. His eyes locked on me. Cold, focused, calculating. Move, he said flatly. I didn't. You're not going into her room, I replied. His jaw tightened. You don't get to make that decision. A calm voice spoke from behind him. Actually, she does. We all turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was Dolores Sanchez, my grandmother's nurse. Her arms were folded, and behind her stood Daniel Reeves and another hospital administrator. Dolores didn't flinch. Margaret Bennett signed a patient directive 2 years ago, she said firmly. She specifically requested that Claire Bennett control all visitation decisions if a family dispute occurred. Emily blinked in surprise. You gave Claire power of attorney. Dolores nodded. My father's face darkened. That document means nothing, he snapped. One of his lawyers stepped forward. My client only needs 5 minutes with Mrs. Bennett to confirm her mental clarity. Reeves spoke immediately. That would be extremely unwise. The lawyer frowned. And why is that? Reeves calmly opened the folder he carried. Because earlier tonight Mrs. Bennett submitted a notarized affidavit. The hallway went silent. My father's shoulders stiffened. What affidavit? Reeves looked directly at him. One confirming that she was fully aware and mentally competent when she transferred the Oak Ridge property to Claire Bennett 16 years ago. The words landed like a thunderclap. Emily gasped. My father's face turned white. But Reeves wasn't finished. And she also confirmed something else. He lifted another document, the mineral rights. Every nerve in my body sparked. My father's voice cracked. What about them? Reeves' expression didn't change. They were included in the original transfer. The air left my father's lungs. The lawyers looked stunned. Because that meant one thing, the natural gas deposit beneath the land belonged to me, not him. Not Bennett Development, me. My father laughed suddenly. A sharp, desperate sound. You think that matters? He looked straight at me. You're not capable of handling something like that. I felt something inside me settle. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was calm. You're right, I said quietly. His smile widened. I knew it. Then I finished my sentence. I'm not. His smile faltered. What? I pulled a folded contract from my purse. Ethan had helped prepare it earlier that afternoon. Just in case. I handed it to Reeves. He read the first page. Then raised his eyebrows. This is unexpected. My father snatched the document from him. His eyes scanned the page, and the color drained from his face. You can't do this. But I already had. The document was a land transfer agreement. Not to a developer. Not to a corporation. But to something else entirely. Emily stared at me. You're donating it? I nodded. All 2 acres. My father exploded. You're throwing away millions of dollars? No. I said calmly. I'm making sure you never get them. The hallway fell silent. Reeves smiled faintly. Be placing the land in a permanent community trust. He explained. The mineral rights are legally protected from private drilling. Emily blinked. So no one can extract the gas. Correct, Reeves said. My father looked like he might collapse. 16 years of manipulation. 16 years of pressure. 16 years of planning. Gone. Destroyed in a single signature. You're a fool? He whispered. I stepped closer. No, I said softly. I'm free. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing left to threaten me with. No money. No reputation. No leverage. Just silence. A moment later, Detective Whittaker appeared at the end of the hallway again. Mr. Bennett, he said calmly, we need to continue our conversation downtown. My father didn't resist this time. He just stared at me one last time. Then the officers escorted him away. The hallway finally exhaled. Emily sat down heavily in a nearby chair. I can't believe you gave it away, she murmured. I shrugged slightly. Grandma always said land should build something meaningful. Dolores smiled. Speaking of which, she's asking for you again. I stepped quietly into the hospital room. My grandmother looked tired, but peaceful. Well? She asked. Did he try something stupid? I laughed softly. Yes, and I squeezed her hand. It's over. She smiled slowly. Good? Then she whispered something that stayed with me long after that night ended. People think revenge is the opposite of forgiveness. A pause. But sometimes, her eyes closed gently. It's just the moment you stop letting someone control your story. Outside the hospital window, the first light of morning touched the rooftops of Redwood Hollow. And for the first time since I was 18, I finally felt like I was home.